some funny fool.
Funny fool?
A funny fool. Okay, what are we going to play tonight? Joined us, to, of course, my mother and David and Shayna Batsheva, Mata Esther, all the people that join us, and Katie, of course, Avital. So we're continuing with the Likutey Moharan, part 1, Bezat Hashem, and I was going over it before the class. We're going very slow, which I think is good. You know, I figured, what's the point of rushing through the lesson? So we'll say, oh yeah, we can check off lesson 1. And so what? Might as well go slow and really understand lesson 1 and whatever lessons we're learning and take our time. So I'm kind of happy with the pace. I had a few thoughts. First of all, of course, we're going to dedicate the lesson to the returning of the hostages, the success of our troops, and the comforting of the families and the refuah shlema of everybody who's sick and injured. And this isn't the type of war that we normally expect. You know, we're used to the 6-day war, used to quick wars, but this war is different. And who knows what the country's going to be like after this war. I was listening to a talk from Rabbi Manis Friedman from today, where he was talking about what is a proportionate response. This is the question that's asked again and again. Basically, how do you know when you've killed enough people that you can stop killing people? And the simple equation is, well, 1,500 people were killed, so you kill 1,500 people, and now you're even, and game over. But what he was saying is that if that's the way that wars worked, then nobody would ever win a war, because one side would kill the equivalent of the other side, and that would be the end. He said the only way how do you know it's enough people that are killed? It's when the other side either gives up or they're dead. That's how you know there's enough. And he said, well, right now we have approximately 10,000 people apparently killed in Gaza. He said, should you say, well, 10,001 is too much, we just have to stop the war and that's it? He said, you didn't achieve the goal of the war. And he said, what's the goal of the war? To live in peace. He said, look at what happened in World War II. The Allies killed enough Nazis that the Nazis never came back. There's still Nazi philosophy, there's still Nazis in the world, but the Nazi regime never came back. So they killed enough people for it to never come back. He said that's when you'll know that enough people were killed. And if you were to stop now, then the people that are being killed now died for nothing. Because you didn't even achieve the goal. Which I thought this was a very interesting point. Rabbi Manis Friedman, a very special guy who has an ability to really give good answers to very difficult questions. And he has hundreds of videos, and he answers difficult questions all over the place, all kinds of crazy stuff. Really, that was the thought I wanted to share. I have other thoughts, but this isn't a class about the war, it's a class about Likutey Moharan, so I figured that was an important answer from a rabbi, so that was worth sharing. Okay, so where we left off was Ot Gimel, part 3, and then I have this other version of the Likutey Moharan over here, the English one, which this isn't even in part 2, what we're learning, so the divisions are different. And here we're talking about seeing the wisdom that's within everything. And he's saying the light that comes from seeing the wisdom in things, the godly wisdom, not just the intellectual wisdom, is so great that a person doesn't have a vessel to receive it unless they make themselves very small. And it seems like contradiction. I'm supposed to be a vessel to receive a big light, so I have to make myself small. I should make myself big so that I can receive more light. But the truth is you have to make yourself small so that your ego is not blocking the light, because the ego, in a sense, is creating a shadow. The less shadow, the more light can come in. That's where we left off. V'zeh atzimtzum shel or hasechel, and this the contraction of the light of the intellect. Hainu, that is to say, le'amin sheyesh b'chol davar sechel nifla, to believe that there's a wondrous intelligence in everything that happens, and we're talking about the things that happen in your life. Af she'eino mevin u'masig oto, even if a person doesn't understand or grasp it. And now I'll bring us back to where we started, like a month ago, or whenever we started the lesson, where Rabbi Nachman brought a story of a guy who came to him and said he doesn't have success in his davening, the Yetzer Hara comes and bothers him all the time, and also he's not respected in his town. And Rabbi Nachman said, if you learn a little bit of Mishnayot after davening, the Yetzer Hara won't bother you, and the people in your town will respect you. And he came back and he said, I'm not able to learn, I don't understand anything. And Rabbi Nachman said, just learn, force yourself to learn, even if you don't understand what you're learning, force yourself to learn, you'll see it slowly, you'll start to grasp a little bit, and then there'll be more and more light, and then it'll show you the way. And then he came back and he said the advice worked. So here he's telling us we have to believe that within everything that happens to us in life, there is a reason, there's a divine reason behind it, even if we don't understand it. Just like the guy in the beginning who didn't understand the Torah, and slowly he began to get it. So too, in the beginning, we don't understand why is Hashem doing this to me or to someone else? And he says, but just know that there's a reason for it. And through this a person will merit the light of the intellect. Zohi b'chinat levana. This is connected to the moon. Shehi mevi'ah et or shemesh betzimtzum. How does the moon work? So we have, this will be the moon. The moon reflects the light of the sun. The sun shines on the moon, and it doesn't have any light of its own. The sun, of course, is a source of light, and the moon simply reflects the light. So he says, the first stage is to be the moon, where you're just reflecting the light. You're reflecting the understanding that there is something beyond what you can see and what's happening in your life. That's B'chinat Levana. Shehi meviat or shemesh v'tzimtzum brings the light of the sun in a contracted way. Ki alevana ein la or me'atzma. The moon doesn't have any light of its own. Ki im ma shemekebelet me'ashemesh. But only what it receives from the sun. V'zoi b'chinat ha'tzimtzum. And this is what we mean when we say tzimtzum, contraction. Hamezakeh et ha'adam le'or ha'sechel hana. That a person merits to receive the light of the divine intellect that's within everything as mentioned above. Ki b'tchila tzarich lahashlich et kol sichlo legamrei. In the beginning, a person has to simply take their understanding of the world and toss it away. B'bchinat ein lo or me'atzmo. This is connected to not having any light of your own. But this is a difficult thing for us to do because we understand what we understand. Don't tell me that, for example, I was just having a conversation with my daughter who's almost 17 yesterday, and she said she was learning about evolution. And she said, evolution makes a lot of sense to me. And evolution makes a lot of sense. Logically, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're a person that believes that God created the world, then it doesn't make sense that God created amoeba and everything came out of amoeba. And the cats are an evolved tiger. And humans are an evolved monkey. And in order to understand the God way of looking at it, the Torah way of looking at it, you have to toss your understanding of the logical explanation of evolution aside in order to receive the light of the Torah, in order to say, the question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. So Judaism has an answer. The chicken came first. God created the chicken whole. Just like Adam HaRishon didn't have a belly button because he wasn't born to a woman. That in order to understand that, in order to understand something on that divine level, you have to toss your intellect aside, because your intellect will say, that doesn't make sense to me. If somebody says to me, one thing evolved from another, that I can understand. But if you're going to tell me that God just created a person, just like that, just like instant person, I have a hard time believing it. So I'm bringing this just as an example because this is something that happened to me yesterday, and I didn't push my daughter too hard. But I myself grew up with evolution, and in order to look at the world in a different way, I really have to take what I learned and toss it aside and try to see things in a different way. So he says, you want to see how the good, or not necessarily, of course it is good, but we don't always see it as good, how the divine is expressed in your life. You have to take your own intellect and toss it aside, legamri. כי בתחילה צריך להשליך את כל שכלו לגמרי. Toss your intellect to the side. אז יאיר בו אור שמש מעט מעט. And then the light of the sun can slowly come in, כמו הלבנה, like the moon, שהיא בתחילה קטנה מאוד. The moon, when it goes through its cycle, it's very, very small in the beginning. You just see a small sliver of it. עד שמתמלאת כולה, until we have a full moon. וזהו העניין של בחינת מלכות. And this is the idea of malchut, one of the sfirot, one of the attributes, the 10 attributes. שנרמזת בלבנה, which is hinted at in the moon. דלית לה מגרמה, שאין לה מעצמה כלום. That the moon doesn't have anything on its own. It simply reflects the light of the sun. אלא מה שמקבלת מן החטא. But only what the moon receives from the letter chet, which we've been talking about, the letter chet and the letter nun, shehi b'chinat chokhmah. The letter chet symbolizes wisdom, b'chinat shemesh, which is connected to the moon. So the sun. So when the moon receives the light of the sun, it's like you receiving godly wisdom, and for you getting something that you didn't understand before. I guess I still need this cold, hot. It's a funny time of year. Okay, so just like the moon slowly gets the light of the sun, so too we slowly begin to understand Hashem's role in our life. And sometimes we only understand it afterwards. All of us have opportunities that we've missed, and those opportunities are gone, and the next one comes, and we don't always know that it's there. There's these stories of the Baal Shem Tov, where he's with the Hasidim, and he says, I want you to meet Eliyahu Navi. And then one of them, for example, they're like, okay, we're ready, and they'll go to the mikvah, and they only have pure thoughts, and they're ready to meet Eliyahu Navi. And the Baal Shem Tov says, let's go, and they go out into the field, and this gruff farmer comes over to the Baal Shem Tov and says, hey, can I have a light from your pipe? And he takes out some of the tobacco from his pipe and puts it in this guy's corn cob pipe. And the guy smoking his pipe, and the Baal Shem Tov is smoking his pipe. And then the guy walks away, and the Baal Shem Tov says to the Hasidim, no, what did you think? And the Hasidim said, think about what? He said, Eliyahu Navi. I told you I was going to show you Eliyahu Navi. And they said, what, the farmer was Eliyahu Navi? He said, yeah, you didn't know that? And they said, no, you didn't tell us. Had you told us, we would have known that it was Eliyahu Navi. And the Baal Shem Tov said, were you on the level, and to merit it, I wouldn't need to tell you, you would know it's Eliyahu Navi. So that's how these opportunities in our life come. We only realize afterwards that it was there. Like, I had the opportunity to buy my office and the office across the hall from me. I remember they were selling it for $20,000. It would be my entire livelihood at this point. It's a huge office and it's rented out to the train. It's like their call center. And I remember somebody knocking on my door and begging me to buy it for $20,000. And I thought, okay, it's not so much money, but this building is a ghost town, or whatever it's called, a haunted house. There were literally homeless people sleeping in the hallway in Binyan Klal back then. And so I thought I'd have to pay Arnona, and nobody's ever going to rent it, and I'd never make the money back. And that was a stupid thing, and that was an opportunity, and that was gone. And then I once went to a Mekubelet, and she says to me, you could have been wealthy from real estate. But I didn't know. So opportunities come and opportunities go. But if you have the light of this sechel, so when things happen to you, you can understand what's going on, sometimes more and sometimes less. And the opportunities come and the opportunities go, and you don't always know when they come. So the moon is connected to the chet. Chet is chokhmah, and chokhmah is shemesh, meaning wisdom and light, the sun, the light of the sun. Ki inyana shel sfirat malchut, because the concept behind malchut, hu lekabel et oram shel tish'a haspirot sheme'aleha. What is malchut? So we have I don't think they have it in this book, they have it in the other book here. 1 second, I'm going to find the map. The map of the Sfirot. I think they put it at the end of each of these, if I remember. Oh, that's interesting. There's something in English here. Here it is. They really put it every time. Okay. So when we talk about the Sfirot, this is what we're talking about. At the top we have Keter, and at the bottom we have Malchut. And the way that it works is this godly energy comes through all of these, but when they get to the bottom, they're all collected by Malchut. Keter is the sun, Malchut is the moon, and the purpose of Malchut is to receive the light of the sun through the Sfirot, and it has to have nothing on its own. If Malchut were a vessel that was full, it can't receive. It's a vessel that is empty, it can't. And so, in order for you to understand what Hashem is trying to give you, you have to, in a sense, be empty. You have to empty your way of seeing the world in order to receive Hashem's way of seeing the world. And he says that's the role of Malchut, to receive from the 9 Sfirot that's above it, to bring this light into the world. Ach, ein la o me'atzma klal, even though it doesn't have any light of its own. V'al yedei, and through, she'adam zocheh lebchinat malchut, the person merits to reach this level of malchut, of emptying their ego, in order to receive Hashem's wisdom. Umekabel al yedei zeh et or hasechel ve'achochma, And through this a person will merit to receive the light of the intellect and wisdom of Hashem. Naaseh or halevana ke'or chama. Then all of a sudden the light of the moon becomes the light of the sun. If you ever have an opportunity when you can see something in retrospect and understand that it was Hashem helping you, and you have clarity, what was originally dark became a little light, and that little light became a bright light, like the light of the sun. Ki naaseh yichud ben sfirot ha-chochma ot chet v'sfirat manchut ot nun. So we make a connection between the attribute of wisdom, which is connected to chet, and the attribute of malchut, which is kingship or sovereignty, which is on the bottom. Now, how do you understand malchut to not have any power of its own? A king has no power without a nation underneath him. If you're a king and you're the only person in your kingdom, you have no power. The only way that a king has power is when there's people below him. מבחינת chet, and this is connected to chet, המלכות שמקבלת אור החמה במלואו. The malchut is what receives the light of the wisdom in its entirety. עד שנעשות שתיהם שוות כמו בשעה שנבראו. Until both of them are equal as if the time that they were created. Because we know the story of the moon and the sun, so they were both equal forces of light, and the moon says to Hashem, hey, why do we need the sun here? You should make me the one that's the sun. And Hashem says, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to make you smaller, and you're going to now receive the light of the sun. And so he says, how does the moon become the light of the sun? The more that you can open your mind and remove your ego, the more you can receive the light of the sun, until the moon, which is you, with the moon meaning you being not having a light of your own, gets so much light that you're on the level of the light of the sun. Meaning that when things happen in your life and you don't understand them, you're now able to see them in a way that you couldn't before, because each time you allowed Hashem to give you some type of divine intellectual explanation, and then you get a little bit more understanding and a little bit more understanding, until things that in the past you thought you understood, now you understand them differently. We talked about paradigm shift and just in general, the way that people see things in their life. Okay. לאחר שביאר שכדי לזכות לכן צריך להיות בבחינת לבנה, after he explained that in order to merit getting chen, meaning wisdom, godly wisdom, you have to be a little bit like the moon, she'ein la megarma klum, that it doesn't have any light of its own, v'letzamtzem et sichlo, and to contract your intellect, meaning your ego, ula'amin sheyeshno sechen gadol b'chol davar, and to believe that there is a godly reason behind everything, shehu chiyuto, which is, so chiyuto means its vitality, its life force. I would say what he's saying here is it means that that's the reason that this thing is happening to you. Because Hashem is not coming just to torture you, even though sometimes it feels like it. Like everything Hashem is doing is for a reason, in order to help you grow. Then a person merits the unification of the sun and the moon, meaning that the sun, which is the godly intellect, which is always there, but you're not always able to receive it, and the moon, which is you, when you're constricting your ego in order to receive the godly wisdom behind that thing, they become equal. You're able to really understand more and more and more why Hashem does things in your life, and that enables you to understand more and more. Until a person merits that their intellect is like the intellect of Hashem, the intellect of the sun. And this is connected to chen, which is grace, which are the letters chet and yun. Nun, chibur halevana, shehi nun im ot chet. The connection of the moon, which is the nun, with the letter Chet, which is the sun, Shehi Shemesh. Chochma v'achiyut, the wisdom and the life force. Yeve'er et b'chinat nefilat achen, shehi achen shel asitra achora. He's going to explain the aspect of the falling of grace, which is the grace of the negative energy in the world. Hainu, that is to say, b'bchinot levana v'shemesh shel sitra achora. That is an aspect of the light and of the moon and the sun of the negative energy, shehem hefech hakdusha, which is the opposite of holiness. Right? Because we know, we've talked about this many times, Zelu asa, Hashem creates juxtaposing energies, good and bad, strong and weak, black and white. And I'm not saying black and white. I like black and white cookies. I like both sides of the cookie. But obviously, in general, we like the light over the darkness. And so just like you can tap into this godly wisdom, you can also ignore this godly wisdom. Aval mi she'eino mekasher atzmo, but a person that doesn't connect themselves, el ha'sechel v'ha'chochma v'ha'chiyut sheyesh b'chol davar, to the wisdom and the divine knowledge and the life force that there is within everything. Meaning, if I tell you, there's a reason for keeping Shabbos, even though I don't understand it. The person who keeps Shabbos does begin to understand it more and more and more. The more you keep Shabbos, the more you understand why Hashem gave us Shabbos. But if you don't want to tap into that godly intellect of something that intellectually, like normal, egotistically doesn't make sense, so you're going to say, why would I not work on the seventh day? I need 7 days to work. I got to make money. I got to go to the mall. I got things to do. If you don't want to understand that there's a deeper meaning behind Shabbos, then you can never see it. A person only sees their physicality in everything, and not the godly intellect, which is the life force and the vitality behind everything. And as a result, the person says, look, there's no God in the world. There's no deeper meaning behind anything. So I just have to drink and eat and satisfy all of my bodily desires, all of my ta'avot. Everything that a person looks at, person just tries to figure out, how do I get pleasure from this thing? Mãnהר gashmit, we're talking about a physical pleasure. The opposite of looking for the godly wisdom behind everything. And the meaning is to find within everything how it can help you to come closer to Hashem. And this is like Eisav that didn't take seriously the firstborn. He sold it bishvil hanaha gashmit, for physical pleasure, shel nazid adashim, for a lentil stew. Kamosha katuv, as it's written, v'yivez Eisav et habechora, that Eisav sold, that he didn't respect, and he sold the bechora, the firstborn. Tahainu she'Eisav biza et asechel hakanal. That is, that he wasn't willing to see beyond what he could see in this world, that there was something more meaningful in being the firstborn than just being the firstborn. Ki ha-bechora hi reshit, because the firstborn is the first. V'hi b'chinat chochma, and that's connected to wisdom. B'mechirat ha-bechora ha-bzuya al yidei Eisav, and through the selling of the firstborn and not respecting it by Eisav, haya gam bizui lechochma. He was also not giving respect to wisdom. What he's saying here, in other words, is that Eisav was just seeing the physical world and not seeing anything beyond it. So if a person, for example, the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to give out dollars, and then people would exchange them and give $1 to tzedakah. If a person received $1 from the Rebbe and says, "Oh, I can go buy a candy bar," and they go across the street and buy a candy bar, and you say to them, "But wait, that was for giving tzedakah." He's like, "Well, who cares about tzedakah? I want a candy bar." This is what he's saying. That this attitude, you will just never be able to see the godliness in anything. The B'chinat HaKatuv, and this is what's connected to, he's giving a text proof for this, for Mishlei, Lo yechpot ksil b'tfuna. A fool does not desire to have wisdom. She'eino mitbonen b'tfuna b'chochma elokit. That a fool doesn't look at the wisdom and godliness that's within everything. Sheyesh b'chol davar, that's within everything. Kedei linhog imo keratzon Hashem, in order to act in the way that Hashem wants. Ki im bihit galut libo, but rather he's only looking at how to make his heart happy. Ki mistaken rak kitzad yimale et ta'avot libo. The person is just looking at how they're going to bring pleasure, physical pleasure, to themselves. V'zeh hainu siluk ha'bechora v'asechel, and this is the tossing aside of the firstborn and the intellect. Kedei lelech achar ta'avotav behema, to go after, in order to go after a person's desires like an animal. Right, I brought the example before that an animal, if a dog is thirsty on Yom Kippur and comes and you put a bowl of water in front of the dog is going to drink the water. But if a Jew is thirsty on Yom Kippur and you put a cup of water in front of the Jew, even though they're thirsty, won't drink the water. That's the difference here. An animal follows their desires, and a person that's working on themselves as a Jew has enough self-control. And the person that's working on themselves as a Jew is also able to see godly intellect in things that would not normally make sense. For example, tzedakah. For example, Shabbos. For example, kashrut. Or all kinds of other things that are part of our religion. Person can say, "Why should I keep kosher? Costs more money. There's less options. The food isn't even that good." Although here we live in Jerusalem, almost everything is kosher. So intellectually, like from just a gashmiut point of view, it doesn't make sense. But if a person says, "But I know that on a spiritual level, it will affect me spiritually, and my connection with Hashem will be affected by it," now you're not talking about physical stuff, you're talking about spiritual stuff. And it says somebody who ignores that, they're just going to be like an animal. This is like an evil kingship. This is like the dark moon, I guess you could say. That about that, it said in Yeshayahu, that the moon was embarrassed. And the sun was also embarrassed. Ki melech Hashem tzvaot b'har Tzion v'Yerushalayim. I'm not sure what the quote there is connected to. That the king, that Hashem is in the land of Israel, in Jerusalem. Shela'atid lavo yitbayishu v'yikalmu ha'ovdim lechama u'levana. That in the future, those who worship the moon and the sun will be embarrassed when Mashiach comes and Hashem is revealed. Nimtza sheyeshna levana shetzrichim litbayesh. And so there's a type of levana, meaning receiving the light of the moon, the light of the sun, but the light of the sun in a negative way, that in the future you'll be embarrassed. Meaning that it was clear that there was godly wisdom in something, but you decided not to see it, and then when the future, Atid Lavo, when the Hashem brings us Mashiach, and we have this godly consciousness that we don't have now, then it'll be embarrassing. Like there are people that do tshuva, and they have tattoos. And afterwards, a lot of them are embarrassed that they have tattoos. But at the time, when they got the tattoo, they didn't think that they were going to become a Baal Tshuva. It wasn't even their consciousness. So the same thing, when a person just follows their animal desires, in the future, they'll have the godly wisdom to see that what they did was wrong, and then it'll be an embarrassment for them. This is the moon of the negative energy in the world. Vihi tikana vetit bayesh, and it will be subjugated and it will be embarrassed b'fnei halevanat shebekdusha, before the holy moon, meaning the moon that's really receiving the light of Hashem, shehi sfirat malchut kedusha. But this is the aspect of malchut, of holiness. We only have like a little paragraph left here, and then I'm going to tell you a short story, and we're finished for tonight. So just to keep everybody staying in the lesson. V'zeh shtei b'chinot, and this is the two attributes: malchut kedusha, malchut sitra achora. The malchut of holiness and the malchut of its opposite. Heim b'chinat yetzer hatov v'yetzer hara. This is the aspect of the good inclination and the evil inclination. Ki yetzer hatov nikra, because the yetzer hatov is called miskein v'chacham, a poor soul but a wise one. V'nikra miskein shehu ani. And why is the yetzer hatov, the good inclination, called poor thing? Because he's impoverished. Mishum shehu b'chinat malchut, because it's like malchut. Now you see, we say ani, which means impoverished, because the person doesn't have anything, but because they don't have anything, they can receive everything. Like malchut. Malchut also doesn't have anything, but it receives everything because it doesn't have anything. V'hi b'chinat, and if you just think about the king, the king has nothing unless he has everything. And when he has everything, it's only because he has everything. But if everything was taken away, he doesn't have anything. There's a story of a king that was lost in the forest. He went on a hunt, got lost, and he finds his little hut in the middle of the forest, and this guy takes care of him. He says, you can sleep here for the night. He doesn't know he's the king. You can sleep on this straw mattress, and he feeds him some porridge. And the king, who had been lost for days, was very happy to have a place to sleep and some porridge. And then the king goes on his way, and a few days later, an entourage comes to this little shack and says, the king wants to see you, and takes him to the treasury and says, take whatever you want. His neighbor hears this, and his neighbor goes to the king with a straw mattress and a bowl of porridge. He says, I want to see the king. He goes to see the king. And the king says, what do you have for me? He says, a bowl of porridge and a straw mattress. He says, you think I want that? He says, out of here, put him in the prison. And the guy says, but you went to my neighbor, and he gave you a straw mattress and a bowl of porridge, and he got anything he wanted from the treasury. Why don't I get it? He said, because when I went to your neighbor, I had nothing. And that nothing, his nothing, meant so much to me. But now when I have all of this, it doesn't mean anything to me. So a king, without the palace and the entourage and the treasury and all of that, doesn't have anything. And that's that's the malchut, that is the yetzer hatov. She b'chinat inyana v'dala, aniya v'dala deleit la migarma. And this is connected to being poor and impoverished and not having anything of its own. She'ein la me'atzma klum. It doesn't have anything on its own. Ki ima shemekeberet me'chochma, but only what it receives from wisdom. V'lechein nikra gam chacham. So even though it's called, the yetzer hara is called poor, he's called wise. Al shem shemekebel me'chochma, because it receives from the wisdom. Ki adam sheholech achar yitzro hatov, the person who follows the yetzer hatov, Yodea she'ein lo me'atzmo klum. Person knows that they don't have anything on their own. Mishum she'sichlo eino mushlam ve'alu lehatuto. Because he knows that his intellect can trip him up and fool him. Kevan shehu beguf gashmo, because the person is in a physical body. ולכן הוא רוצה לקבל הערה מהחוכמה והשכל העליונים, and so if a person wants to receive from the supernal wisdom, כדי לדעת הדרך שילך בה, to know the path on which they have to go, הוא גם מבטל את עצמו לחוכמה והשכל הללו. The person has to nullify their own ego in order to receive Hashem's light and wisdom. והיצר הרע נקרא מלך זקן וכסיל, and the evil inclination is called an old king and a fool. בבחינת מלכות הסטרא אחורא, which is the kingship of the evil energy, of the negative energy in the world, שאינה חפצה בחוכמה ושכל, that it doesn't want to understand these things. It would be like a person saying to you, fine, very nice, I don't want to know about Shabbos, I don't want to know about Kashrut, I don't want to know about Halacha. Even if it exists, I don't even want to know about it. That's called the king that's old and foolish, shenikra melech Hashem malchut, because the Yetzer Hara also has malchut, the ksil and fool, Hashem she'eino b'chochma, ela b'tavot. It's called a fool because the Yetzer Hara doesn't want wisdom, but rather undesirable desires. B'pchinat lo ichpotz ksil b'tfuna. This is connected to what we said before, that the fool does not desire wisdom, the chulei kanal as mentioned above. Okay, so we're stopping there for this week. To summarize what we were learning tonight, if you want to receive Hashem's light, you have to make yourself smaller in order to receive it. The less ego you have, the more Hashem's light can come in. And he says, but a person that doesn't want to receive Hashem's light at all, they simply won't receive it. They won't have a vessel for receiving it, and it's not, even if it's right in front of their face, it won't be there. Kind of like what happened on October 7th. Now all these warnings are coming out. All these people that wrote books and gave interviews and were generals and advisors and everything, and the people that were in charge just weren't able to see it. So in order to see it, you have to make yourself a vessel for receiving Hashem's light. So a short story that was in the Chabad newsletter that they had out here in Israel a few weeks ago. There was this woman, she'd been going out on shidduchim for a while, and she couldn't seem to find the right person. And she got frustrated, and she said to her father, listen, you know what I'm looking for? Instead of me going out and meeting all these guys, why don't you meet them, and you'll decide if one of these guys is right for me, and then I'm willing to meet with him. Just one thing, she had a thing she didn't want, a guy with payot, with payas. And so the father goes to the next guy. He meets him. He's very impressed. The guy learns. The guy works. He's a serious guy. And he made sure to check really well, and the guy didn't have any payas. So they set the two of them up, and they go out and they get along very well. And within 6 weeks, they're engaged. Then a few months later, they're married. And then 6 months pass, and they're coming for the Seder on Pesach. And the father notices that his son-in-law has payas, the beginning of payas, like nice, thick hair over his ears. So he says to his daughter, what's the deal? So she started laughing. And she said, when we were dating, just before the date, he went out to get his hair cut, and normally he has a friend in yeshiva that would cut his hair, but the friend wasn't around, so he went to a barber, and the barber by mistake cut off one of the payas. And he didn't know what to do, so he said, cut off the other one, and I'll let them grow back over time. And so she said, so we went out, and for the 6 weeks that we were going out, I didn't see any payas. And then after we got married, he said to me, by the way, this is what happened, and I'm regrowing my payas. And she said, now that I know him, it doesn't bother me at all, the payas anyhow. She said, the payas, I was concerned that it was only for somebody who's really serious and didn't have a sense of humor. He's not like that at all. And then she understood the Hashgacha Pratit, that Hashem arranged things so that she would be able to marry the right person, and she wouldn't be stuck by something superficial like payas. So Be'ezat Hashem, everyone that wants to get married should be able to get married, and things like payas or whatever it is, try to overlook the little things so that Bezat Hashem, you can make room for the person themselves. Okay, Shkoch, everyone will continue next week. Allah, 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 Allah.